the only area where Buhari defeat for that statement. Now only appointment. When you're talking about project, the project is very absurd. If you to spell out, what does it be done now? But if you say appointment, and in the type of appointment, you appoint people in front.
Like say the man na
I'm ready to whether our leaders are the number of
when they get the position first. Why una no come win APC? Why una no win
get na Now, see, let me tell you.
Save the problem with sound.
I am for everybody, I am for nobody.
No, you not talk about me. No,
in another way.
How are you sure, sir?
Keep quiet. I am in another way. I am for the only area where Buhari defeat for that statement. Now only appointment. When you're talking about project, the project is very absurd. You need to spell out. What does it be done now? But if you say appointment, and in the type of appointment, you appoint people in front.
like say the man na
I'm ready to whether our leaders are the number of
when they get the position first. Why una no come win APC? Why una no
A very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us here on Global TV. I'm Uyag Mofegbe, welcoming you to Global Morning. We're live in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Remember, we're also active across social media platforms. The handle is at Global TV NG. It's a great morning. It's a Thursday. All right, so just a matter of a day in between before his weekend, at least in West Africa. And then again, as I say, a good weekend begins on a Friday, which is tomorrow. But we need to continue to have very topical conversations around the issues that are right in front of us, whether they are in the area of governance, leadership, and all of those challenges that we have to deal with, especially from the standpoint of the new governments we now have in place, whether at the federal or state levels. As it stands today, we understand a few appointments have been made by the President, Bola Tinubu. For example, he has already appointed a chief of staff in the person of the outgoing Speaker of the House of Representatives, Right Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila. We understand he has also appointed the person of the former governor of Benue State, all right, George Akume, to be secretary to the government of the Federation. And then in the days and weeks ahead, we know more appointments will happen, especially when the 10th Assembly is fully in place, and then things begin to jump off in full throttle. That is important because it helps to not just provide leadership at different fronts. It helps to also galvanize the policies of government across board, and then, of course, make laws. And all round, we're able to provide leadership and midwife very pivotal projects for this country. We are hoping that happens real soon. The papers are full of stories today, whether it's the removal of fuel subsidy and the impact it's having on Nigerians, or the appointments that are in front of President Tinubu, or areas around infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So we are going to just give you some insight into that by turning to national dailies this morning. We have, first of all, the Leadership newspaper that has as a big story there, Tribunal admits final election results as exhibits in Obi's petition. Governors back Tinubu on fuel subsidy removal is also a big story on today's Leadership newspaper. Governors back Tinubu on fuel subsidy, and then we have riders there as president meets with oil marketers, declares war on poverty. I'm sure that war is very timely because we're told that This is a country where you have, by the statistics available, 133 million. Think about that for a second. That's a whole lot of number in a country of, say, 210 million people. All right, 133 of these human beings, all right, are said to be in poverty. Some people say extreme poverty. Others call it multi-dimensional poverty. But nomenclature notwithstanding, the important thing is we must find a way to address issues around poverty, whether it means allowing people access to resources to build skills, broadening the education frontiers in such a way that we redefine what we call education in this country. I mean, specifically tailoring our education to our needs in such a way that when people leave the university, for instance, they are readily available to work, because while you're dealing with poverty or talking about initiatives aimed at addressing the issues around poverty, you realize that you also need to pay attention to the level of unemployability we now have in this country. Because on the one hand, you're talking about people not being employed. That is on the assumption that they have skills, they have knowledge, they have capacity and competencies they can bring to the marketplace or to the workplace. But how about those who are unemployable, even with 2 degrees, for example, in the bag for them? That also needs to be addressed, because in the end, people must be able to build capacity, whether in the formal or informal sector, to be able to add value to their lives first and then to society as well. Okay, so it's a timely call that the president is saying, look, going forward, we have no choice. We've got to double down on the war, as he calls it, against poverty. Meets lawmakers elect over NAS leadership today. So the president is scheduled to have a meeting with the leadership of with lawmakers elect, those who are coming into the 10th Assembly, over the issue of leadership. We understand even the APC is divided along those lines within its own fold, but then want to believe that the leadership of the All Progressives Congress, alongside the opposition parties, will do the needful and ensure that we have a united National Assembly, that we do their due diligence and then, of course, play their part as is expected of them in the eye of the law. As we stick with the leadership newspaper, we have, if you look at the right end of the leadership newspaper, we have a bunch of other stories. 95,000 Nigerian pilgrims perform 2023 Hajj. 95,000 Nigerian pilgrims performed 2023 Hajj. Palm oil imports from Malaysia surges 353% in 4 months. Again, that is a story that is not particularly pleasant, because we were told just a few decades ago, Malaysia had been here in Nigeria to pick up palm seedlings. And today we're told in 4 months alone, Nigeria has imported 353%. All right, I mean, that's our imports of palm oil from Malaysia has surged 353%. That is whooping, to put it mildly. All right. So the last headline we're looking at from the leadership newspaper this morning, with a picture of the outgoing Speaker of the House of Representatives, Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila. It says, Ninth House passed 510 bills, 2,000 motions in 4. Is that something we should celebrate? Well, it depends on the context from which you're having that conversation, actually. Okay, that said, we turn to Tribune now, everyone. Let's look at Tribune, which also has its own big stories this morning. But we're just going to look, first of all, at the headline that is right behind the nameplates of today's Nigerian Tribune. Petrol subsidy, Tinubu directs NEC to work on palliatives for Nigerians. Oil marketers to donate mass transit buses worth 10 billion naira. Of course, that came from the meeting that the president held with the oil workers yesterday, oil marketers yesterday. They were led to the villa by the governor of Ogun State, Dapo Abiodun. One of the things they told the president, by way of pledging their commitment and support for this government for the overall benefit of Nigerians, is that they will provide between 50 and 100 buses, all right, so sort of mass transit buses, to ease the pain that comes with this subsidy removal. A court stops EFCC, ICPC, DSS from arresting Yari. Our administration shall consult and dialogue, but never dictate. Nigeria will be impartially governed according to the Constitution and the rule of law. That's credited to President Bola Tinubu. Of course, he said that on the day of his inauguration. I'm sure Nigerians will follow through with him on that promise. Okay, so quickly we are turning to the Guardian newspaper this morning. Let's see what the Guardian has got for us this morning. Guardian is also loaded, no doubt about that. Uproar over NNPC's sleazy $25.9 billion oil swap, 13.9 trillion naira subsidy payments. Okay, I'm sure this again has to do with transparency and due process. Okay, every now and then there's always a story around the books of the NNPCL, how that certain monies or funds were not remitted, how that there are controversies around some joint venture initiatives, how that some payments had not been made, how that the NNPCL on the one hand is saying the federal government is owing them certain amounts of money, and on the other hand, the National Assembly, whether it's the Senate or the House of Representatives, is inviting the leadership of the NNPC, in some specific cases, the GMD of the NNPCL, to come explain certain things, shed light on some gray areas with regards to their books. Recall that even the former governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, His Eminence Lamido Sanusi Lamido, had also had his own time, for want of better words, with the NNPC, as we then knew it back in the day, about certain amounts of money. In some cases, we heard $20 billion. In some other cases, it was $40 billion that had not been remitted by the NNPC. I'm sure that it behoves on the NNPC to also continue to show some amount of transparency in the way it handles its finances and overall its books as well, because we can't continue to have an institution, so pivotal like the NNPC, continue to be a topic of discussion in a light that isn't very, very good. All right, I think that's the way to go for Nigeria and for Nigerians. Okay, so let's go to the foot of today's Guardian newspaper and look at a few headlines from there. A picture here of the president shaking hands with George Akume, former Benue State governor, now the secretary to the government of the Federation. He says, "I will do my best," Akume promises at inauguration as SGF. Atiku laments liability to access INEC materials. I take that again. Says Atiku laments inability to access INEC materials after paying 6.69 million naira to commission. Subsidy removal. Tinubu meets oil marketers, directs NEC on interventions. Ondo cabinet splits over Akeredolu's incapacitation. At the foot of today's Guardian as well. Two headlines here. Ensure your appointments reflect merit, diversity. Can clerics advise Tinubu? Nigeria loses $2.7 billion to beans exportation ban. Okay, those are stories, headlines, if you like, from today's Guardian newspaper. Up next is the Daily Sun. We're taking a look at the Daily Sun this morning. NAF takes blame for airstrike killing 39 in Nasarawa. FG plans earn as you work pay policy. What does that mean for all of the unions, whether it's ASU or the NLC, which is the umbrella body, or as we like to say here, the organized labor? We will get to find out in the days ahead, I'm sure. A number of hours in office, quality of work will determine remuneration. Isn't that what we already do in the private sector? Isn't that the culture in the private sector, where you must bring value, and the value you bring determines what you earn or what you're paid? That's the way to go. What people are paid, what people earn, should be commensurate with the work that they bring in. You can't come to work because you say it's civil service, because you say quote unquote it's government work, when you're supposed to resume at 7:30 or 8 o'clock, for example. You're showing up at 9:30 or even far later than that. Then at the end of the month, you're holding out your hand for your paycheck. We can't make progress like that. You can't build a country like that. We must take a cue from the private sector on certain levels and be able to learn some of the values that they've adopted for decades, and how those values, how those cultures have helped them to build their own organizations. The civil service has to do that. I know of a governor, for instance, who has been able to, in the last, 6 years, all right, create some sort of an infusion between the public service, the civil service in particular in the state, and then he has been able to also bring some kind of infusion of the private sector, just to ensure that the civil service in that state is robust, and then it's able to deliver the best of value for that state. All right, so we look at a few stories now, again, from the Daily Sun, okay? A tribunal, Tinubu, INEC opposed testimony by ad hoc staff. Can President slams El-Rufai over comments on same-faith tickets? Governors back president on subsidy removal. It's an insult to say LP dictating for NLC at Jero. Okay, and then we'll look at This Day newspaper quickly. This Day says on the front page, Tinubu seeks partnership with state governors to end extreme poverty is the way to go. We can't overemphasize that. Directs NEC to develop measures to cushion effects of petrol subsidy removal. Governors pledge support for policy. And then one of the writers there says, petroleum marketers back policy to donate 100 CNG compliant buses for mass transportation. Okay, Huriwa calls for Sirika's arrests over alleged fraudulent Nigerian air. That story is quite a big trend right now because people are now beginning to ask, where exactly did you get it wrong with this entire process with the Nigerian air? Well, we'll see how that pans out. We understand some of the officials involved, whether it's from the regulation end of the aviation industry or from the Federal Ministry of Aviation. The Senate has been talking with them, and I'm sure they are forthcoming already with so much of information, details, and highlights of how that transaction actually played out. I'm sure it's only fair that at this point we talk a bit of sports, so we turn to Punch Sports Extra now to look at some sporting headlines there. NPFL Super 6 no victor in Lagos as Day 3 games end in stalemates. Title battles intensify. West Ham join Chukwueze race. Okay, Madrid agree over 100 million euro deal for Bellingham. It's hammer time. Londoners end 60-year wait for Europe glory. All right, what else do we have on Punch Sports Extra? If you look at the left end of the front cover, Jassy makes fifth bid for United. We understand that's about, is around the £6 billion pounds deal. That's a whole lot, but then we are here. It's already the fifth bid and the final of it. Messi to join Inter Miami. Mourinho discusses new Roma contract. Okay, then what's more, says Mendy linked with Chelsea exits. WBC plans Fury Joshua fight. When will that be? Find details on Punch Sports Extra this morning when you pick up a copy of it. All right, so let's look at Daily Trust quickly, everyone. Daily Trust, the last paper we're looking at, by the way, on the show this morning. Just immediately beneath the nameplate here, it says, OBLP tender final results at Presidential Tribunal. That actually happened yesterday. FG to incur additional 2 trillion naira liabilities as Senate passes police pension bill. Nigeria's poverty level unacceptable, Tinubu tells governor. And now the president continues to emphasize the importance of fighting poverty and specifically what must be done to ensure that that fight is won, all right, on behalf of Nigerians. Fuel subsidy. Filling stations record low sales as governors back Tinubu. Streets, offices quiet, residents remain indoors. President asks NEC to work on palliatives, reduce work days to 4, Murik tells FG. We understand some states are already doing that now. Kwara, for example, has now adopted the 3 work days a week model. Edo State has followed suit as well. So we are looking at the possibility of a few other states also doing that right now. These are tough times, and state governors are beginning to be more smart, or if you like, smarter now than they were with the way they manage the economy and so on and so forth, because whether you like it or not, subnationals, or states as we call them, an integral part of a federal system. So they've got to do their bit, they've got to play their part as well, so that together we can surmount this challenge that the fuel subsidy removal policy has brought. Okay, so let's see a few more headlines just before we wrap it up here. Overcrowding, NACON restricts pilgrims to 5-day stay in Medina. I'm not bothered, critics call us rubber stamp assembly, Lawan. Police seal Nasarawa Assembly Complex as leadership crisis deepens. And then what more do we have this morning? 10th Senate supports the progressives. It's also right there at the foot of today's Daily Trust newspaper. Incidentally, that's what we're going to leave it with the papers, everyone, this morning. But let's remember what the highlights are. Basically, there's the issue of fuel subsidy removal. That policy to many Nigerians, whether you like it or not, did not come as a shock, even though the bite that it brings can be shocking for them, because now you have people having to trek much more than they had done in recent past. You have people having to now cut, as we say, their coat according to their cloth, and that's the way to go. We are now having to rethink the way we live, reprioritize how we spend